Heard Elias Crow laugh, it echoed across the firing range like something alive. It wasn't loud, and it wasn't forced. It was calm, steady, almost amused, as if the world around him was performing for his entertainment. The recruits standing nearby didn't know whether to laugh with him or step away. Most chose to step away. There was something unsettling about a man who smiled when everyone else felt pressure, fear, or doubt. Elias Crow had that smile from the beginning, the kind that said he had already survived something no one else in the room could imagine. Elias was not born dangerous. He was built that way, piece by piece, mistake by mistake. He grew up in a forgotten industrial town in the Midwest, where the factories shut down faster than families could move away. His father worked nights and drank days. His mother learned early that silence was safer than questions. By the time Elias was 10, he understood that laughter was a shield. If he laughed, people assumed he wasn't afraid. If he wasn't afraid, they left him alone. That laughter followed him into adulthood, into the military, and eventually into the stories people whispered when his name came up. He joined the armed forces at 19, not out of patriotism, but because it offered structure, discipline, and an exit. Training exposed something rare in him. He didn't panic. He didn't freeze. Under stress, his mind slowed down while everyone else's sped up. When bullets cracked overhead during live fire exercises, Elias laughed softly, not because it was funny, but because the fear couldn't find a place to land. His instructors noticed. His superiors noticed more. By the time he entered special operations, Elias Crow was already a legend in small circles. Missions went wrong around him, yet he always came back. Not untouched, but standing. He developed a reputation for smiling in firefights, a thin curve of the lips that unsettled enemies and allies alike. Some said it was arrogance. Others said it was madness. Elias never corrected them. He knew the truth was simpler. If he stopped smiling, he might start screaming. The mission that changed everything was never supposed to be memorable. A joint task force operation, deep urban insertion, extraction of a high-value target tied to weapons trafficking. Intelligence said light resistance. Intelligence was wrong. The building was a trap. Narrow stairwells, reinforced doors, overlapping fields of fire. The first explosion shattered the illusion of control. 2 men went down before Elias could even register their names. Chaos filled the air, thick with dust and shouting. Elias moved forward because stopping wasn't an option. His weapon sang in controlled bursts, each shot precise. He laughed then, not loudly, but enough for the man behind him to hear. That man would later say the laughter gave him courage. It also gave away their position. The enemy brought out the mounted gun on the 3rd floor. High capacity, industrial grade, modified beyond legal limits. When it opened up, the sound was no longer gunfire. It was a roar. 3,000 rounds per minute tore through walls, bodies, and courage alike. Concrete exploded into powder. The hallway became a storm of metal. Elias saw men disappear in fragments of gear and blood. His laughter stopped in that instant, not because of fear, but because something inside him finally broke. He survived by inches. By instinct. By luck he never believed in. He dragged himself behind cover as the gun chewed the space where he had stood seconds earlier. When the firing finally ceased, the silence was worse. It pressed down on him, heavy and absolute. Elias didn't laugh as he stood. He didn't smile. He just stared at the carnage and felt empty. Official reports called the mission a partial success. The target was eliminated. Casualties were listed, names typed in neat rows. Elias was awarded a commendation and a quiet medical discharge. No one asked him how it felt to hear that gun. No one asked what happened when the laughter stopped. They assumed he was fine because he didn't complain. Civilian life didn't welcome him. Crowds made his hands twitch. Loud noises pulled him backward in time. He tried jobs that required silence and solitude. None lasted. Eventually, he found work as a private security contractor in a city that never slept and never cared who watched over it. The pay was good. The nights were long. The streets were familiar in a way he didn't like. People began to recognize him again, not as a soldier, but as something else. The man who didn't flinch when violence erupted. The man who stared down armed robbers without raising his voice. The man who never laughed anymore. Rumors grew. Some said he was haunted. Others said he was waiting for something. That something arrived on a rain-soaked night downtown. A mass shooting in a financial district building, high floors, automatic weapons reported. Police were overwhelmed. Elias was on site, assigned to a corporate client who had already fled. He could have left. No one would have blamed him. Instead, he moved toward the sound he recognized too well. The gunman was efficient, trained, calm. The weapon he carried was a modern monster, spitting bullets faster than thought. Elias felt the familiar pressure in his chest, the memory of that hallway, that roar. His breath caught. For a moment, he thought he might freeze. Then he stepped forward. The confrontation was brief and brutal. Elias used the environment, angles, timing. When it was over, the gun lay smoking on the floor, and the gunman stared at him with disbelief fading into nothing. As sirens filled the building, someone asked Elias how he stayed so calm. He didn't answer. He couldn't explain that calm had nothing to do with courage. It came from knowing exactly how bad things could get. The media latched onto the story. Headlines called him a hero. Pundits dissected his past. The laughing soldier became the silent guardian. Invitations came from law enforcement agencies, private firms, even politicians. Elias refused them all. Attention felt dangerous. It pulled him closer to a past he wanted buried. But the past had a way of resurfacing. A journalist tracked down the details of the mission years ago. She uncovered inconsistencies, missing footage, altered reports. She contacted Elias with questions he didn't want to answer. When he ignored her, she dug deeper. When she dug deeper, people noticed. One night, Elias found his apartment door unlocked. Nothing was missing. Everything was wrong. A message waited on his kitchen table, typed, precise. You survived because you were meant to remember. The signature was a symbol he hadn't seen since the mission, burned into his memory. The twist came with realization. The gun that ended his laughter wasn't just a weapon. It was a prototype, a test. The mission had been an experiment, measuring human response under impossible fire. Elias hadn't been lucky. He had been data. The people behind it were still active, still refining their machines, still erasing evidence with bullets and silence. They didn't expect Elias Crow to be the variable they couldn't control. They underestimated what happens when a man who once laughed at death decides to confront it instead. Elias didn't go to the police. He didn't go to the media. He prepared. He trained his mind to face the sound again. He rebuilt himself, not as a soldier, not as a guard, but as a witness. The final confrontation took place in a facility hidden beneath a logistics hub, where the same guns were tested. Improved, perfected. When the firing began, Elias didn't laugh. He didn't smile. He moved with purpose, every step fueled by memory. 3,000 rounds per minute filled the air, but this time, the sound didn't own him. He shut the system down, exposed the operation, and walked out as alarms screamed behind him. The world never learned his full story. They got fragments, redacted truths, official statements. Elias Crow vanished after that night. Some say he changed his name. Some say he watches from the edges, making sure the laughter never stops for the wrong reasons again. And somewhere, in a quiet place far from gunfire, Elias learned how to smile, not because he was unafraid, but because he had finally taken control of the sound that once defined him.